Hello, Avatar fans, and welcome to the next episode of the Avatar Online podcast. This is going to be episode 230 of our regular shows, and we're recording this on June 27th, 2021. This is the official podcast for the fan site, AvatarTheLastAirbender.online.com, and I'm going to be your main host, Morgan Airspeed Prime. Joining me on the podcast is Greg2B from the site.
What's up, everyone?
Excellent. So, we've actually got quite a bit of news to cover here on a variety of different topics. Our main topic is going to be the preview pages for Suki Alone, which did come out since the last podcast, so we'll focus on that as more of a discussion piece. The rest of it, though, we have some kind of book information, the new podcast, official podcast launched, and some action figure news. So we'll start with this. Avatar: The Last Airbender North and South Omnibus Edition has been revealed. So we have the new cover, and then the only other sort of important detail here is that the release date is February 22nd, 2022. So quite a bit away from this one. And the main thing to comment on that is just that they continue with the trend of having much longer between omnibus releases than they did at the start. So I think there's only 4 months between the Promise and the Search and the Search and the Rift, but now the Rift into Smoke and Shadow is still ongoing since February, and that book's not out until September. So there's like 7 months between that, and then in this case, obviously, it's like 5 months. Not really sure what's kind of going on there with these books that pretty much just are reprints. There's only maybe some minor editing to be done at the end, adding in like the library edition kind of extra pages right at the back and the new cover. Not sure why everything's being so spread out, but this should be the last of the 5 books that make up the spine image, which is going to be the image for the North and South Library Edition, which features most of the cast. Does make me wonder what they're going to do with the Imbalance Omnibus Edition, because unless they're going to add something onto that image, it's just going to be either the start of something new, or they're just going to have a more generic spine image. But what are your thoughts on the North and South Omnibus Edition announcement?
I like that. I don't know. I like the image that they have for it. I think, the fact that we're finally getting towards, the full collection of things, I think is good. I think it's a really good format if you don't have them already and you haven't been getting them one by one. So I think it's definitely worth picking up if you don't already have them. So, I like that whole concept behind them, and, the different artwork that they actually do have on it, I think is also really good as well.
Yeah, the cover is very nice. It's the same sort of style that they're going for with all the other omnibuses. White background, characters as the focus, with in this case, 2 characters in like full color focus and 2 characters faded into the background. So it's Katara and Sokka, makes sense, as the focused on characters, and then Toph and Aang in the background with some interesting Katara doing water bending, and then there's also an ice effect in the background. The only real comment I'd have about this is just that I do think Toph's pose is a little out of character for her. In that I don't think we've ever seen her purposefully attempt to do a giant high jump kick that takes her off the ground. That doesn't feel within her style necessarily, and that's the only thing I'd say there. But it does look nice the way they drew her doing it. It would be interesting if she does ever do something like that. But do you have any thoughts on Toph's giant kick?
Yeah, no, I saw that noted by some other people as well. That is a particularly interesting pose for her to do. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I figure she probably can do something like that well enough. It's just, like you said, it is, typically something that we wouldn't see, but, maybe something in the future.
Next up, staying on books, is more delays for upcoming Dark Horse books. I forget if when we talked about the announcement of Beast of the Four Nations in the last podcast, if we mentioned the first delay to this book or not, but I'll just go over it again just in case. So both Beasts of the Four Nations, the standard and deluxe edition, as well as Avatar: The Last Airbender Chibi's Volume 1, Aang's Unfreezing Day, have both been delayed again. So Beasts of the Four Nations was initially announced by Previews World, official comic solicitations, as coming out in October. Within a week, it was delayed into December, which everywhere had. And then basically a week and a bit later, the current date is February 22nd, 2022. So a further 2 months of a delay onto Beast of the Four Nations. The Chibi book has been delayed from initially being announced by EW, an official news article reveal, saying it's coming out in July. I think the day that article went up, the listings for this book went up and immediately said it was September, so that's already a delay. And now the most recent one that happened at basically the same time is that it also has been delayed into February 2022, but this time the 8th of February, so 2 weeks before Beasts of the Four Nations. I think both of these are kind of some of the more frustrating delays we've had to comics, just because it looks really bad for the Beast of the Four Nations book to literally just be announced and within like 2.5 weeks of announcement already have suffered 2 delays on a book that people are actually excited for. Fair enough if they need that time to get it out, but it looks kind of weird that you have October, December, and February all in such a short period of time. It probably looks even worse with the Chibi book, which is a very short book. It's only 48 pages. It's a volume 1 as well. It's probably not particularly consequential as well. So I don't know what's holding it up. But to go from July to September to February, that's a pretty major delay of overall 7 months, I think. And for a book that already doesn't have a lot of hype behind it, it's just going to lose that as the release date falls further and further out of what people expect for it. But what are your thoughts on more delays for Dark Horse books?
This is really interesting. I mean, it really makes me wonder if it's really like a scheduling, timing coinciding with other type of things that we're not aware of right now, rather than like the actual production of the book actually being delayed. Because I mean, we know, for the most part that the Avatar one is like completely done. I mean, there's nothing as far as they've mentioned or the artists or anything like that we know of that's needs to be done, which of course there could be other edits or something that they notice later on, but of course we don't know that as the people that are waiting for it. So there's nothing really indication on our end, at least as far as I know of now. So that's really, I guess just, like you said, it's not the greatest look for something that, it seemed like there was, a bit of interest behind it just from, the small group of people that sort of have been keying in on it. Granted, it may not, be any huge world building or any, we're not getting any sort of, super specific information from it other than, maybe just a fun little side story. So, it's not the biggest thing, but for the other one, for the Beast of the Four Nations, I do know a bunch of people that were, that one seems like an interesting thing. And that's, one of the key things. And I think we mentioned before, it was interesting to note that it was coming out, so early compared to all the other ones in that, line that they're doing there. So maybe this is it just being pushed just to sort of coincide with the rest of the books or something like that. I don't know. It is just, a bit, just sad on their part of just how it's coming out, and I guess just the lack of information maybe on why for the people who were following up on these things, which isn't a lot of people. I mean, it's probably like not a huge amount in the grand scheme of things, but for those who do know, it does seem kind of odd.
Yeah, and there was a bit of discussion with Beasts of the Four Nations surrounding just the idea that has this book actually been officially announced even right now? And it's a weird one because it didn't get an IGN or an EW article revealing it. We just saw it in comic solicitations. But Previews World is official comic solicitations. It's pretty much what all comic shops use to help them place orders and stuff like that, because it's I think it's linked somewhere in with Diamond at some point. I don't know the full situation, but it is official. We've used that as a news source multiple times over the years. So it being revealed there is that's official. Dark Horse is a comic company. They solicit all of their books each month, and they always link back ultimately to Previews World. So that was like official information that came somewhere down the line from Dark Horse, and then it's up on Amazon and stuff like that. So it's not just like places where like publishers are selling the book to bookshops. No, it's up for purchase for everyone now. Now it is weird that the book isn't up on the Dark Horse website yet, but the Dark Horse, they haven't updated their listings in quite a while on their website. They don't have the North and South Omnibus up there yet. Obviously, I think the biggest kind of joke in all of this is probably the Free Comic Book Day book still has no information about it, and that event is coming up very, very quickly. So, that is a kind of weird situation in that this is a big enough book where I would have expected a big article that maybe has like a very early preview page or something like that to go along with it. So, what are your thoughts on that with Beasts of the Four Nations? That this kind of just has, in a way, been announced along the same lines as like a North and South Omnibus, where it's not really news, it's just like a book, it's a reprint book. This big book has been announced in sort of the same way.
That makes me really think that this was really pushed out in a bit, too early sort of form or fashion, like, just sort of through, Dark Horse and the publishing that is sort of went through sort of the normal, process of things, but it's not really, it hasn't really been set up for the whole sort of like, the marketing and all of that normally goes behind when these books, typically are released. So I don't know, it really makes me think that there's something more going on with this specific release of these books, and I don't know, maybe this really is part of like a grander scheme of things.
Yeah, because the important thing to note, I think, with all of these like releases is that Chibi Volume 1 is the only new story content past Suki Alone, and Suki Alone's out in like a month at this point. That book is done. It's 100% done because I've read it. I have the review copy, so like that book is done. I can confirm. Chibi Volume 1 is the only book into the future because we don't know what's next for Korra Comics as much as we do kind of know some stuff. Like they considered a book to be coming out at some point for Korra. Not sure what's happened to it, and the switch to one shots I doubt was just for 3 books, so I'm assuming they're going to continue that, but we don't know that for sure. And then we don't know how Avatar Studios affects things. So it's kind of weird that like the solicitations are basically into sort of February next year, and the most recent big book is coming out next month. So, there is like a massive amount of time, like half a year, where there's not going to be a new big Avatar book, because this is not going to take the place of even a one-shot, the Chibi book, I don't think. So something's like up here where they're maybe holding back on some announcements to make a massive announcement about everything Avatar, or Dark Horse are really slowing down with new books. I don't really know what the situation is. It seems weird to kind of create this situation where there is going to be a massive gap of like any new story content right as you're building up to like lots of story content. But anyway, next one is related similarly in that it's more Abrams books, but finally we have a picture for Avatar Last Airbender, the Kyoshi novels box set. So this was a listing that existed as just a listing, no picture. We now have a picture. I think it pretty clearly is some sort of a artist render Photoshop type thing, because every time I look at this image I just look at how like it's really weird, skewed all over the place. It doesn't look right to me if this is an actual picture of a physical thing, because it's a box but it doesn't really look like it's shaped like a box. And the main reaction I've seen to this is just people saying this is really lazy. It's just the Shadow of Kyoshi image on one side of the box, and I'm guessing that probably is it. We'll see if they have Kyoshi logos on the front, or they attempt to do the other cover on the back. I haven't seen many people particularly impressed by this image or anything like that. Like, no real effort to do anything unique at all with this. But as a kind of value pack, I guess, of the hardcovers, I guess it's sort of okay, even though I think at retail price it is literally just the the price of the two hardcovers added together, and it's not really extra value. It's just free box basically. But Greg, what are your thoughts on this box set image?
Yeah, I definitely can get the idea that it looks like the perspective is skewed a little bit oddly just because of how it comes down to the bottom. It looks like it's actually going in on itself. So, yeah, I would guess it probably is, sort of like a temp rendering of it before they actually have like the official like sort of physical, test version of it actually produced. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess, the art is cool. I mean, it is the original art that is on the book, so it's not like it's bad art or anything like that. But I definitely do get the idea, behind people's concerns of, for this, sort of collection of them, it would be nice to have something that, is a bit different. If it could be, some other art from the same artist, that would totally be cool. I think for a lot of people, as we've seen, like with the calendars, where there's, other art in this sort of style. So, something along that lines, even if it isn't sort of full color, would have been cool if they could have commissioned the artist to actually, create something again in this sort of style. I think that definitely would be cool for this. But I mean, I don't know. I guess if you don't have them, it might be worth it to get it in this sort of way. Like I don't have either of the books. I only have them digitally. So, it would be something that I would consider, depending on the final result of the actual one, if I really was, wanted the physical copies of it.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Like I've been wanting to get like a second copy of the books, just to have one to put like highlighter marks on and stuff like that. So I have kind of clean copies as well. I still might get this just because it is a box that will keep the two books together, I guess. But I definitely want to see more of what this is actually looks like and so on, because again, like there has to be sort of like a barcode somewhere on this. Like, is there description text on the back, or will there be a piece of like card just kind of glued onto the box? And like, how are they going to like package it? That sort of thing. Right now, it just feels like okay, it's out in October, which isn't too far away. But yeah, it's just interesting, kind of not particularly interesting, but it definitely seems like I didn't expect when I did the video talking about this as news to do so well. It just seems like Kyoshi anything is super popular. Like that remains to this day, and like it's huge because this video did way better than I expected it to, because it's literally just a kind of image that breaks geometry and stuff like that, and it's kind of weird looking. But yeah, that's that. No new Kyoshi books, no new novels announced yet, which is another thing of like, we sort of know there's a new novel coming out from the German publisher, but there's been no news whatsoever about that. Which maybe you can kind of come up with the conspiracy theory that they're holding it all back to announce everything at once, but we don't actually know. That'd be really weird, but it could happen. So I think that's it for book-related news until we get to the Suki Alone preview pages at the end. Next, we'll go for our sort of mid kind of topic here, which is the official Avatar podcast, Avatar Braving the Elements, did launch earlier this week. They put out 2 podcasts this week. The first one on Tuesday, which is going to be their typical release day, but because it was their launch week, they decided to also put out the second one on Friday, which was the first part of their interview with Mike and Brian. So the 2 episodes that we got were Janet Varney and Dante Basco talking about The Boy in the Iceberg. That was episode 1, no guest on that one. The second one was Janet Varney and Dante Basco interviewing Mike and Brian, focusing on the sort of their origins, basically, I suppose, as creators. Wasn't really focused on Avatar all that much. I listened to both of these podcasts. I enjoyed them for what they were, but they weren't like super exciting necessarily to me. I think was the main thing I came out of them kind of feeling, is that like, oh yeah, like this is just a fan podcast, but the 2 hosts happen to be voice actors. I appreciated that they actually left a lot of the typical voice actor chat to the side and actually did just kind of analyze and review, recap the episodes. That's actually, I think, the way I wanted them to do it, and not just have it be the same as everything else. The first part of the interview with Mike and Brian I thought was not particularly great, partly because I think everyone's heard the story of how they came up with Avatar and the history of Mike and Brian. It's in the art book. I think there was a documentary that they put out in the DVDs at some point that's up online that you can watch that also covers it in quite a lot of detail. So they even joke about it at the start of the podcast that they're going to go over the same things, they're going to answer the same questions, and that's basically what it turned out to be. So hopefully the second part of the interview is a little bit better, because I think that, to me, the whole interest of a Mike and Brian interview is that it's taking place post Avatar Studios announcement. And even if they're not talking about Avatar Studios, just to hear them talk about Avatar in a more kind of, modern light when they're working on other stuff related to Avatar is kind of interesting to me, because we don't get many interviews with Mike and Brian, and so it is always interesting to see what they talk about. But they did. Avatar was the topic of discussion for maybe 5 minutes in this podcast, like right towards the end, and even then, like, they really hadn't quite got to them talking about making Avatar. Have you listened to either of these first two podcasts yourself?
Yeah, I've listened to both of them.
Okay, so what were your thoughts on, I suppose just your thoughts on the first one first, because that's going to be more like most of the episodes, them doing the recap, doing the analysis. What were your thoughts on how they did that?
I thought that was pretty good. I mean, I think they had it, pretty well structured in terms of how they, broke down the different parts of, the episode and going over, just, sort of the various things that happen throughout. I mean, it's, it sort of goes as, you would typically think as of, podcast format for, reviewing an episode. I like that they have, very specific, like, segments with music interludes and all of that. So they had like most valuable bender, most valuable non-bender. They had, I like that they also added in, some current, like social commentary on it, just, in terms of how it relates to things that are happening, in the real world now, just, in the world in general, and of course in America as well. So, I like that they had those different aspects to it. Both of them together, of course, is, a good pair to have. Janet's done, podcasts for like forever. Like, I've listened to a bunch of her podcasts in the past. So, it's a good idea that they got her, in order to do this podcast. And Dante, he's always, a cool person to just, listen to, and he does a whole bunch of stuff as well. So, I think them working together on this, and, when they do bring in more people like they did in the second episode, I think, for the most part, it's going to work pretty well. I think, I'm curious to see how they go about it, knowing how many episodes they at least have said they have, planned for the whole thing versus how many episodes there are. So I'm a bit curious about, time-wise, how they're going to go about that, because they definitely, took their time on, the first one, which, could just be just because they're getting up to speed with how they're going to do it and how it's going to flow. So, that'll be interesting to see how it goes overall. But yeah, I think, like you said, it really is just, sort of a fan podcast, just with two people who actually worked on the series, and sort of some things they know about it, some things they're going to find out about it as they watch the shows, and how every episode or every time you watch Avatar, there's always something new you can find out about it. And I'm sure as they go through, that'll happen more and more to them, even if they have, worked on the show, there's always things that you can find out from them as they mentioned themselves doing it. So, I think for the most part, the first episode, it went as you would think it would go for, sort of a typical review podcast. Just, it works really well, and the people are, quite good at presenting and speaking, which is always a good thing for a podcast for sure.
Yeah, I think the thing that I liked the most was just that you can tell that they put the time in to do like research, so that they actually like came across like they knew what they were talking about. You could also tell that they were sort of very cautious about like not saying anything that was like wrong. So it was kind of cool to see like Janet Varney bring up like, oh, I just read the art book, basically, to be aware of all this sort of behind the scenes stuff and so on. So that's kind of nice to see, and yeah, they have good chemistry together, and it's fun. I do want to know, as they go forward, like the way they presented it was sort of that the Mike and Brian interview was almost like its own special thing. So like they didn't want to waste their time bringing them in on a recap, but like, are they going to be bringing in, say, like Jack DeSena as part of the recap, or is it just going to be like Janet and Dante's rewatch of Avatar, or when they get to the Warriors of Kyoshi and they have like Jenny Kwan on, is she reviewing the episode with them or what? That's what I'm interested, because if they're doing the episodes like this, like one at a time, they're not even going to get through all of ATLA by the time they're done with their 40 episodes for the first season. I'm guessing it's probably a case where like behind the scenes they are pretty much confirmed for like a second and third season to do all of ATLA, do all their interviews, do all of Korra, all the interviews. They're probably confirmed for as many episodes as they need, but just announcing it with 40, it kind of feels like, ooh, you're going pretty slowly here, because 2 episodes in, you've covered 1 episode, and I assume they'll devote, again, 1 episode to 102. 103 is a pretty important episode. Maybe you can combine 104, 105, but if they are bringing the voice actors on, I think we know they're getting the voice actor for Suki and Boomy on, so I don't think they'll do that in the same episode. So it leaves them only like a few opportunities to kind of blend episodes together, like maybe Jet and the Great Divide or something like that, if they're going to go and spend this much time on each episode. So what are your thoughts on that? How do you think they'll go about doing some of the other voice actor interviews of like specific characters in for episodes and so on?
Yeah, no, that's a good point that you bring up there, because, there is a lot of episodes and they can have them. I think, I don't know, I almost wonder if that's too much to ask of, sort of someone that you're bringing on an interview, just sort of have them do the interview and have them review the episode that they're in. I mean, I think it's a cool idea and it's a cool concept, but timing wise, I wonder if that's like the best use case. I mean, definitely is something, more unique that them as, actors, voice actors on it, that they have, that accessibility. That's something that, something like you or me might not particularly have. So I think that could be a cool spin if they do integrate that into it, or if they were able to get that into like part of their, recap for it. But, based on how they're doing it now, with episode 2 being Mike and Brian and sort of, I don't know, making it almost sort of like a isolated, episode, and also having it in 2 parts, because if the next part is, episode 3 is just this part 2 of their interview, then again, that's another one where they're not doing a recap of an episode. So it definitely makes me wonder how they're going to be breaking down, just doing, episodes by episodes. And I don't know, I don't think there's anything, if they're not trying to go as deep as they are in the first episode, there's nothing to say that they can't, combine episodes together. That's just sort of how they're going to do the podcast and how they're going to flow together. So even though, it'd be cool, like how we do when we do like 1 per episode and we're breaking down every little thing as much as we can, it seems like they're going more of like, the formatted podcast route where, things are more segmented and things are more sort of set up, sort of like how you would do, sort of like a video recap. A lot of them online, sort of like, how the Avatar YouTube channel is doing, where things are more structured like a TV show type of thing, which is totally fine if that's just sort of what they're going for. So I don't know. I think they definitely can group them together and sort of speed up the flow of things. But I also, don't see why, if people are liking the podcast and, they're willing to, sponsor it to go longer, that they just, go for as long as they need to, and do the same thing for Korra.
Yeah, it does make me wonder though, like within say like the first 10 podcasts, like how many of them are going to be recaps, how many of them are going to be interviews, or are they going to have episodes that are maybe longer? They are like more like 2 hours, but half of it's the recap, half of it's an interview separate than the recap. I get the feeling that maybe that's how they'll do it, because otherwise I think they'll be very slow to get through episodes if they have to do like, oh, here after like a 2-week break we're doing the second episode of Avatar, and now we're going straight to an interview with Jenny Kwan for the next episode, and so it's another gap between doing another episode. So I can see them maybe grouping it up a little bit more, but we'll have to wait and see. But But yeah, the second episode, first part of the Mike and Brian interview, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this one, like you said, is a lot of repeat from stuff that you've heard before. If you've, checked out any of the other interviews or from the art book or, some of the, sort of the written interviews that they've done online on various, websites and stuff, or even if you've been following like their personal like Instagram accounts, you've seen some of these stories, or if you're from back in the day, the Tumblr, where they used to put a lot of that stuff up there as well. So yeah, a lot of it is some retread. I think some of it, as you may like, some of the things we might have, forgotten, the little, sort of side tidbits that they mentioned, such as like, where the inspiration for the combined characters came from, the old character reference that they mentioned in that part, like, some things like that, I definitely have forgotten over time. But yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, it is sort of, like they said in it, it is sort of a retread of things that they have mentioned before. So, I think it's, it works for what they're doing. I mean, it really is, just sort of getting the information out there about them. And, it's also, it's been, quite a while since, the show has been on. So there's a whole bunch of, new fans out there who are just sort of getting into it, especially when it was back on Netflix and all that stuff. So, there's, tons of people who don't know the story quite as well as you and, as we do. So I think, from that perspective, it definitely is worth it to have it out there in another format that people can sort of listen to and sort of, get the most out of it. I think, the only other thing I thought was interesting from there is that I can think of off the top of my head was them just sort of mentioning sort of the initial sort of like, fan reaction to it from, back in the day before, social media was as big a thing. I think that was probably the most interesting part of that part of their interview for me to listen to, just because I do remember sort of, not that I was involved with it back then, like I am now, but I do, know about the whole like message board systems and like sort of like when Avatar Spirit started and some of those other sites like that, and the site that we're part of as well. So I think it was nice to see them mention that. I don't think I've heard that as much from them, but other than a few tidbits like that, it was pretty much your standard fare of, how they started the show, what other shows that they worked on, how they sort of came from Risi, and those sort of long lines.
Yeah, it was a lot of sort of, most of it was sort of like Mike and Brian, the college years type thing, discussion, which, it's fun if you haven't heard the story, like it's fun, but I definitely got the impression, just I think from the first two episodes of the podcast, that I think they are definitely aiming this at the new Netflix audience, people who've just gotten into Avatar through the Netflix show. That's who this feels like it's for, to just like, if you've never heard the proper discussion surrounding it, like Janet and Dante are going to try and like bring you through that, and the same with the interviews with all the cast. It does make me interested in the second part of the interview, which I'm guessing will move completely away from origin story into, I guess, them talking about ATLA. Janet, I think at the start, did introduce the two of them as being sort of like the heads of Avatar Studios. She said Avatar Studios for sure. Not that they like said anything about it themselves. It does make me wonder, will we get to some sort of a thing where even just a simple question of just like, what are your thoughts on announcing Avatar Studios or something like that, where they'll say something about them coming back, because that's kind of what I was almost waiting for to happen at some point, is just not just that quote from that article that we have of like their like one-liners, basically Avatar Studios has been announced. So I kind of want to hear just them talk about coming back, because the big thing back when Korra ended was that not a lot of people had hope that we'd ever come back to Avatar because of the relationship with Nick, what happened, and because the way Mike and Brian were talking was that like they were taking a big break from animation and working on projects like this, and that's why like they both went into doing their own separate projects at that point. So I kind of want to hear like, okay, talk about some of that stuff, but I get the impression that it probably will just be more about ATLA coming out, and I don't know what specifically they're going to talk about, I suppose, but we'll see how it goes, because I think they said they're going to be on probably multiple episodes, that they probably had multiple conversations. So I guess there's room for like a Korra episode of them talking about Korra and other stuff when needed. Um, yeah, do you have any thoughts on what specifically you think the second part of the interview will focus on?
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a good point there about if it's going to be, about the studios or if it's just going to be more about, ATLA and this sort of inception. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the whole idea of the Avatar Studios, them getting into that in very detail probably isn't going to be. I mean, I think, like you said, this really does seem like it's focused on just sort of the show and its sort of inception. And I mean, they sort of, I guess they sort of mentioned a bit about that in terms of, like going to South Korea and sort of, working with the animation studios and how that relates to sort of like, the cartoons here in America specifically, and how that sort of has, progressed over the times over the last, 20 years or whatever. So I did like that part from the first part, but I do hope that, I presume that they'll probably go more into sort of that for ATLA in the second part in terms of, how things are, how, the production goes, how sort of, the actual process of that goes, just sort of, more of, I guess, sort of the inspirations that they haven't already mentioned. So I don't know. I mean, I think it would be really cool if we did get more mention of, the just sort of the studios in general, just from them directly, because I mean, like you said, we do have the little bit from sort of the interviews and sort of their sort of reasoning and being able to change like the airbenders and sort of that sort of concept of how they can change and sort of be reinvigorated to tackle this world again and have many more stories to be told, which I think is cool that we got that in the interview. But it would be cool to hear it in the more from them directly rather than sort of pull quotes from an article that's been edited down or whatever. So I don't know, it definitely would be cool if we get more of the production of Avatar Studios type stuff, but that would be something that I really, really would, think that you wouldn't get much mentioned. Like, I think they mentioned in episode 2, they mentioned like a little bit about, other sort of like, pitches that people were giving to them and working with like a live action place, studios. So like, they dropped like minuscule things like that, but I wouldn't really expect anything more detailed like that, at least not yet. I think maybe once they start actually having stuff come out, they would be more willing to talk about stuff like that. But it's probably, I don't know, I think we've been saying for a bit that it's probably still a bit too early to really go for all of that, especially when it's just like really in the initial phase still.
Yeah, and their approach to the podcast seems to be that, like, I don't even expect them to go too in depth into Avatar, and that I think it probably will be like early production on like just book 1, because they took the approach in the first episode of not at all spoiling anything that happens in future episodes, and instead just like mentioning like this is a foreshadowing moment, and like literally just saying
they
like
did.
that. Which is like fair enough. I think like when we do reviews like that, we tend to not try and tangent too much into episodes that aren't the one we're talking about, but we'd more acknowledge that people have seen it for sure. Like I don't know how many people are actually going to be watching through. Like, I've only watched the first episode of Avatar and I'm following it through first time with this. I doubt the numbers are particularly high on that, but I get why they took that approach, and that's why I feel this early Mike and Brian interview probably is just like early stages, and they probably won't even be talking about like character arcs even that all that much or anything. But yeah, this is a weekly thing, so every Tuesday is when there's going to be a new episode. I don't think they confirmed for sure that the second part of the Mike and Brian interview is next week, but that was sort of the impression I kind of got. But we'll see what they've actually put out. I don't really know. Yeah, it'd be nice if they put up maybe a little bit of a schedule, because it seems like they're kind of pre-recorded a little bit ahead of time. I think they said something like that somewhere, that they're not going to be able to like react to feedback for like the first bunch of episodes, but they will be after like a certain amount. So I guess they've got about like 10 episodes ready to go or something like that. But yeah, that's the Braving the Elements podcast. We'll, I guess, mention it on our own podcast if anything notable happens as we go through. But next section of news is action figure news. So we'll start with the smaller one here. It's also the most recent piece of news, and that is that Loyal Subjects have put out the first, I suppose, teaser proper image. I suppose it's on their side of things, the first proper announcement of this figure. The Book 3 Aang, or Aang Monk as they're calling it, but we know it as Book 3 Aang. So this is their second figure that they're announcing here after their Book 1 Aang, and we get a look at it in package, and then they also have a brief video talking about like the articulation of what you get in a separate Instagram post. So yeah, it's Book 3 Aang. He comes with three faces. One is a kind of like stern or more kind of neutral focused kind of face. One is a sort of angry Aang face, but not super angry. And then one is a rather creepy kind of neutral smile, but the eyes look kind of weird on it. So that's not a great head sculpt, but it's okay, I guess. You get, obviously, well, 8 hands, the 2 that are on the figure, and then 6 other kind of hands as well. So you get like fists, hands for the glider, and then I suppose airbending hands. And then it looks like you get 2 little sort of air spirals as air effect parts. And overall, I think, the Book 3 Aang design I think is more suited for an action figure because the costume is less kind of crazy and less restricted. I still wonder how the sort of left shoulder and right hip are going to be, just again because of the outfit. But based on the image, they've shown a few poses. It doesn't look like it's going to be as bad as it is on the Diamond Select, where the left shoulder on the Diamond Select is basically unusable because of how far down the yellow bit goes on that figure and how hard that material is. It seems like they're a little more flexible here, so they should be more usable overall. But yeah, I like the look of these figures. I haven't got my copy of the Book 1 one yet, or really seen many people talk about them. But to me, they look like the best blend of sort of being really, really accurate and also really, really articulated. So they seem to have the nice blend of price point. They're just maybe not the most available figures because they're from, I suppose, the least well-known company. And then they do also confirm officially Katara and Zuko are also coming. We knew that from before, from some product listings. And they're saying that those figures are coming out in October. So I guess we'll be seeing pictures of them in the coming months because this figure's coming out in August. So yeah, what are your thoughts on Aang Monk?
Yeah, Aang Monk. No, I think the character, how they have it sort of created, and the posability that they have from all the stuff that we've seen so far actually looks pretty good. It feels like you actually have the ability to really do some, at least some basic sort of poses with it, and the effect parts and the different hands that you get with it, I think is actually, seems like this is probably a good, deal overall for it. Like you mentioned, I think probably, like you said, some of the head sculpts look a little bit odd to me, but I don't know, I guess that's just sort of a hard thing to grasp with the Avatar characters, because it seems like that's something that we're always sort of mentioning, and I'm sure we'll mention it again later on with some other ones. But I don't know, I feel like that's probably the only thing that would hold me back from really, really being super excited about it. But I think it's still pretty cool, and I'm sure it's gonna, be a really one that people really want to get.
Yeah, because the price point on these, I think, is like, it's like $15 or $16, I think, is how much a best action figure costs, which is like right in the middle of the McFarlane toys, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and then Diamond Select, because it's 10 for the McFarlane small scale figures, and then it's 25 for Diamond Select. So these seem like the overall sort of best value for money. I suppose the only question I'd have is, like, I want to know what the quality feels like in hand in terms of, like, figure to figure, how do the paint applications look, and then what are the quality of the joints, because the Diamond Select figures sort of feel like they just like barely function with the level of articulation they have at that price point. In that the articulation I just find to be so not usable on those figures. Like I never pick them up to pose them because I'd be there for like 20 minutes just trying to get a normal pose out of them. But yeah, it's nice to see they're leaning into, I suppose, their beginning of their kind of wave 2. Again, I want to see what they're going to do with regards to which book, Katara and Zuko, it is. I think everyone wants book 3, but they're probably going to do book 1. We'll see how it goes, though. Next up, though, is the kind of big one for the action figures, is that we had, in between episodes, both the teaser as well as the full reveal of the 5-inch line of Avatar action figures from McFarlane. So the figures are, we get Aang with glider, Appa, Katara, Prince Zuko, and Sokka, and of course Appa is a 7-inch creature scale to itself. So let's go through the pictures here. So let's start with the standard Aang here, which is just the $10 Aang. You get book 1 Aang with his glider staff. Pre-orders are up for these already and stuff like that. I think in the US they are Walmart exclusives, and they're not exclusive elsewhere. I don't know how that works with regards to like comic book stores and the availability there or not, but it actually might be easier to get these if you're international fans rather than US fans, which is kind of an odd situation. But yeah, obviously they are smaller scale, so these are more like 5-inch figures, cheaper price point, limited articulation, but they've still got articulation in that, like the head moves, shoulders, elbows, hips, knees, no ankles or wrists, but it looks like you're still able to get poses out of them. So the Aang here has a pretty wide grin. It's not the widest grin I think we've ever seen, but I think it looks pretty decent. It doesn't look as creepy as I think the Diamond Select wide grin Aangs look. The other thing with this is that, again, you see the complexity of Aang's book 1 outfit in that they've chosen not to try and be like overly accurate with it in terms of like making the sort of orange shawl bit its own separate piece. Instead, they've just molded the tops of his arms to be orange, and they have the detail there to get across that it's a layer of fabric, but they're not trying to be overly complicated at this price point. And the same with the weird yellow over brown bits that I still don't understand with Aang's kind of the lower part of his outfit that is kind of differently done on nearly every version of this figure. But I think it looks pretty good. Obviously, the way they do the arms makes it feel very different than a lot of the other ones we've had before, but it probably makes for a better action figure that they've gone for the more action figure version of it. So what are your thoughts on the Aang, the basic Aang here?
Yeah, no, I think the whole idea that you mentioned about it being more action figure oriented, I think works well for this, especially at this, sort of price point to get it, disposable, which, I mean, almost feels like this is almost, other than sort of like the last little bit of joints on the ankles and the wrists, you can pretty much do, depending on how well it actually like holds the poses, you probably can do a lot with this. So no, I think for what you're getting for it, this actually looks pretty good. And yeah, I think, the grin doesn't feel anywhere near as, off-putting as it does in a lot of the other ones. It just seems like a really open face just in general for Aang, which I think, for the character that, works well.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, I suppose we can just talk about the kind of packaging a little bit here, because we do get in-package images of these. So they're going for this kind of cool navy, like white avatar text on kind of navy background with a little bit of kind of black kind of characters, and then the main kind of hero image for the whole line is Aang in the avatar state with his fists together and stuff like that. That's on all of the characters, and then the sort of like character bit at the front is sort of like kind of gray with navy writing, like big capital letters of the name. Looks pretty good. The packaging isn't bigger than it needs to be. It's sort of a blister pack, what you'd expect from an action figure. So I definitely like the look of how they've gone about the packaging. And then on the back you get a bit of a description, which we will get into the descriptions because they're pretty weird. But again, a nice image of Aang on the back with a unusual description. So, but what are your thoughts on the packaging for the standard figures?
The packaging is cool. I think that's perfectly fine. I think I like this one better than I've seen for some other ones. So no, good job with that.
Yeah, like the Wave 1 Diamond Select figures, the packaging is so big. It's so needlessly big for how big the figures actually are. But here's what the description for Aang on the back of the figure says. It says, Aang is the hero and spirit of the show. This adventurous 12-year-old is the last airbender and the only known survivor of the air nomads. The arrow on his head, a constant reminder of his lineage. Okay, that's fine so far. His destiny is to learn the art of the Avatar and defeat the Fire Lord of the Fire Nation. Little bit weird on the wording there, but it's okay. But rather than save the world, Aang searches for adventure. He wants a life full of fun, experiences, not heavy responsibilities. That's Aang. Aang believes people are either in harmony with the spirit of the planet or corrupt and misled. Because Aang is the Avatar, he has a connection with nature as well as animals. If he's lost, Aang is able to listen to the spirit of the trees, rivers, and mountains who tell him which way to go. He's a trickster hero, uninhibited by social constraints and constantly breaking taboos. The second half just completely loses me in that, what are they talking about? This spirit of the planet is the definition of the word avatar in Hindu, I think, or something like that. And it's the concept that they initially were going for Avatar, but that is not what they went with in the actual series. So Aang never talks to the trees or listens to them, or the river or the mountains who tell him which way to go, and uninhibited by social constraints, constantly breaking taboos, and just kind of he's fun loving and Omashu, okay, he's a little bit kind of breaking some rules, but not that much. It's really weird. These feel like they took them from 2005, but back before the characters were properly defined. But what are your thoughts on what the Aang description there?
Yeah, no, I remember reading this, and it's all over the place. I don't know. It's weird. It's I don't even feel like it's from back then, because I think back then a lot of that stuff wasn't even as defined to even sort of guess at what he could really do. So it's really they're just sort of took a cursory sort of look at the character based off of maybe some of the meanings of the actual words of things, and then just sort of put it together. It definitely doesn't feel like someone who watched the show or I don't know, read the Avatar wiki to sort of piece together a basic sort of summary from this. I feel like they could have taken it from something that was already done before and just copy pasted it, and that would have been a bit closer than this. I don't know. It definitely seems like an odd one. I mean, I don't know how important that is, these days to be reading that. I mean, I remember, that used to be the thing where you could actually get information from the characters by reading their character bios and the bio sheets and stuff. But now that everything is online, that's not as important. So I don't know. But yeah, that definitely is an odd one to look at. I don't know. It makes me wonder what people who haven't seen the show would think about the character just from this description. It'd be interesting to have someone who doesn't know Avatar read that and tell us what they think of that, because that's it's an interesting one. It almost seems sort of they use a jester type character as the basis from medieval times or something like that. That's what I get from that description, other than the fact that the character is a kid or something like that. So I don't know. It's an odd way about going about the character description for Aang, at least from our perspective, at least.
Yeah, I think with most of these descriptions, it's a case of the first half is kind of fine. It's just general, kind of basic, but that's the character. And in the second half, when they tried to be a little bit more specific, they just like, who are you talking about? We'll get into the other ones as we go through, but the next figure here is the Aang with Glider. This is the combo pack. It's the sort of more like deluxe basic figure. Now, interestingly, the differences are rather subtle in that it's still the same core figure. It's a Book 1 Aang with the staff, but you get the splayed out open glider as well, and the head sculpt is a bit different. It's still Aang with a big grin, it's just the grin is even bigger, like his mouth is more open, and this is getting on the verge of being kind of a bit creepy and like the Diamond Select figure. I don't know why they didn't just go for like a more neutral expression, just so there's a bigger distinction between the sort of like emotions of the two figures, whereas right now they're different, but they're basically the same expression, and that just feels a bit odd to me, because the figures aren't that different in that you don't need to get both Aangs really if you're buying the first wave. Like, just get the combo Aang, because you're getting everything you get in the standard Aang. It's a bit weird. I like the glider, like you can see how they do it here in terms of the sort of very cool sort of fabric effect here on the plastic. They have this on a lot of the figures of just, they do a really good job with just the kind of surface detail kind of sculpting, and it looks really good on this. And the glider itself actually might be fabric. I'm not sure just by looking at it, but it actually might have some element of fabric to it. But what are your thoughts on the glider Aang?
Yeah, no, I like, just the idea of, having a version with the glider, having it fully open, I think, works well, and it just gives you more options for posing the character. I do wonder if it's fabric. I mean, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking that it's probably not fabric, because it's probably not like, it's, the top part's not collapsible in any sort of way. So I don't know, I wonder why they would go through the effort of making it fabric if it can't really sort of like collapse in any sort of way. So I would be more along the lines of it being just sort of like a textured plastic, which I think is cool. It works, and it just gives you another option for it. But no, I think other than any of the sort of like minor differences, it works cool as just another one that you can get. So I wonder if it needed to be a whole separate one. I guess, it is another part, so I guess price accordingly. But it almost seems like that could be part of the original one.
Yep. Next up is the creature Appa, though, which is obviously sort of the star of the wave, basically. Really cool looking. The detail on this is really incredible. Again, the details of like as they do the fur, the little bits on his face where it's kind of like different style of fur. There's even like on his horn you can see some kind of nice details. It's just like, you can tell that they put the effort in to make this Appa sort of as big as possible, while not making it like really, really expensive. So they did a great job at keeping the detail up. In terms of articulation, the mouth can open and close, which is nice. I think there's some motion on the head. I'm not sure how much, but there's some. And then the tail, I think they said, was like a separate part, so there's some motion because of that. Otherwise, it's not really articulated, of course, because it has to hold the pose. And then in some of the pictures, we can see that there's enough space to hold definitely one figure, maybe two, but you can see that this is where the scale is maybe like not exactly like where you'd want it to be. But it's I think a really good attempt for a $25 Appa, which not a lot of the toy lines do, and keeping it within I think a decent price. This actually looks quite good. So sure, you're probably not going to be able to pose all of Team Avatar on Appa's back, but I think you'll be able to do some fun poses of just like one on the back and the others beside him, like they've done before. So what are your thoughts on the Appa creature figure?
Yeah, no, I think the Appa is pretty cool. I definitely like sort of the style that they have for it, the texture that they have for it. The bit of posability that we do have for it, I think, works really well. I mean, it's not going to be, of course, up to, full scale, but for, what they're able to go for the price point that they're, meaning to meet. The fact that it can get, one figure in there, maybe another or whatever. I think it's totally cool with that. And, out of, the Appa figures that we've gotten before, which I don't think there are many really, this is probably like the best one. Most of the time you get like, a plush or something like that, which is cool, but I think this definitely, is a whole nother look for the character that, you definitely don't normally see in any sort of like official capacity other than, a lot of people have made like their own versions of Appa and stuff like that. So no, I think it's really cool that we're sort of getting this now, and just the overall look of Appa. I think this is one that people might just get just because. And I'm definitely considering it.
Next figure is Katara. So it's obviously book 1 Katara. She comes with a sort of I suppose it's kind of a water whip, kind of just a general water effect part. But still, it fits in her hand, either hand. And I think Katara is probably the best the figure of the wave. That's not the Appa. I think again you can see the detailing on the different kind of fabrics that they have, the color, the 4 shades of blue in her outfit and stuff like that. And again, it's the same level of articulation, but I think it looks really good. That the head sculpt is good. They've done her like a hairstyle, which is quite complicated, very well, I think. And again, the hair also has sort of texture. It's not just like a flat piece like on some of the previous toy lines. So I'm pretty happy with this. Like, Katara was probably the best from Diamond Select Wave 1, and I think it looks to be the same again here. Again, I wonder sort of how flexible or not the kind of outfit is with regards to her leg articulation. But it looks like it's not super thick, so it should be pretty okay. So I definitely like the Katara, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the Katara overall is pretty good. I mean, I don't know. For me, the face almost, I don't know. When I see the video that you posted of them actually sort of breaking down the character, I think that looks a lot better in that sort of condition of lighting than these specific sort of like preview images. I thought, maybe her face might be a little bit too sort of round in the cheeks per se, at least compared to sort of like, the traditional sort of character model from the animation. But overall, I like the character. I think, the ability that she has for posing, and like you mentioned, the texture for the hair, the water effect part for what they're going for here, all of those sort of like little details, I think, work pretty well for this character, for this figure that they're going for here. So no, I think it definitely is probably one of the better ones that we've gotten so far, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, and so we'll get back into the character description here. The Katara one says, Katara is a caring and passionate 14-year-old girl. Kindness and empathy are her most endearing traits. Katara is determined to save the world despite her limited abilities. Katara is a waterbender who longs to become a master waterbender in order to save her tribe. She practices waterbending every day, adapting it to the basic airbending philosophy and stances that Aang teaches her. Her mother died when she was 8 years old, so she was forced to grow up fast. Katara wears her mother's necklace as a reminder of her nurturing spirit. Katara is very mature and responsible for her age, and always plays the mediator between the often bickering Aang and Sokka, her brother. This one's mostly okay. It's just a little bit like she wants to become a master waterbender in order to save her tribe. It's like, I guess, yeah, roughly. She practices waterbending every day, adapting it to stances, airbending stuff that Aang taught her. We never see that in the show. She does ask Aang for to teach her bending in the first episode, but he just says I don't know how well my airbending will work with your waterbending. But I'd say that's roughly sort of behind the scenes canon, that Aang as a master bender would be able to help a beginner bender just with the general concept of bending. So I don't really have much of a problem with them saying that she uses Aang's experience to help her grow, even though he doesn't know waterbending. I think the biggest problem is the bit right at the end. Always plays the mediator between the often bickering Aang and Sokka. Do Aang and Sokka like ever bicker in the show? Like I can't remember like a single moment of those two being a conflict and Katara forced to play the in between of those two. It's more of like Aang and Sokka played the mediator between Katara and Toph, but like never this dynamic. But what are your thoughts on the Katara description?
Yeah, no, that last line is it makes me really think. I'm trying to think. Like I can only remember like maybe like one or two times where like Sokka was like, not even angry, but he was just like, direct with Aang with about like something that he would do. Like, and I think that was really like at the end of the season.
Yeah.
So no, even something like that, like, just never like they're the two that get along the best out of like the group. Like there's more issue with like stuff that like Katara wants to do than with the two of them. So it definitely does seem like an odd one. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe they're just trying to play off of her like standard character traits in general. That if there was bickering, that she would be the one to be in between them, but they don't have that, so it seems really odd that they made mention of that. I don't know. It's another one of those ones that's like, where are you getting these like cues for this, or is this just something that you're just sort of just trying to like add into it to like make it a full paragraph or something like that? I don't know. It definitely seems like there's always something odd in each of these at least.
Yeah, because the thing with Sokka is like, okay, Sokka is sort of like he doesn't really believe Aang in like the first two episodes, like, but that they're not at odds with each other because of that. That's just like Sokka being Sokka, and then like Aang is mainly interacting with Katara. In episode 15 and 16, you do get Sokka sort of, like you say, being sort of rather direct with Aang because of Aang holding back the information about Hakoda in 15 and then burning Katara in 16. But in neither of those episodes does Katara play the mediator between them, nor would you classify the sort of dynamic there as bickering. So like I don't think they ever like bicker at all really. And then even if there is a scene, it's like one scene, and it's like you would never put a character trait based on the one scene of it. So bit weird, but okay. Next figure is Zuko. So it is book 1 Zuko. So we get ponytail Zuko here. The surface level detail on the armor, the kind of like leathery effects, really cool, and how it's like different than the sort of more fabric parts of his armor. Very nice. Lots of good detail. Again, same articulation as before. I wonder, is it more limited with Zuko because like the armor comes over his shoulders and stuff like that? But we'll have to wait and see about like sort of the flexibility of it. He does come with two sort of like fire daggers, I guess, is what they are. So that's kind of nice. And the head sculpt seems pretty good. They have the right color, I think, for the scar. The pose, the expression, I think, kind of fits book 1 Zuko. Like, it's not like super angry, but it's sort of that like on the verge of getting angry style pose. So I kind of like that they were rather restrained with this one, because in the video that McFarlane posted, he shows off a look at the 7-inch figure for like a second, but that's a very angry Zuko expression on that Zuko. And so big contrast there. But your thoughts on the Zuko figures, I suppose, both of them?
Yeah, no, I mean, the one that, the 5-inch one, I think it definitely looks pretty cool. It looks pretty accurate and on model to, sort of book 1 version of Zuko. The detailing is good, like you mentioned. It does have, some ability for posability. They do have like one image where it's like sort of posed in like sort of the standard, sort of pose that you would think for firebending, but it's not sort of at like its typical max, especially with like not having the ankle sort of, bending. You can only go so far with it regardless. So I think it's probably good in those instances that it is limited to some degree, because you're never going to get the perfect pose for at least a 5-inch figure. So no, I think that one looks pretty good overall. And yeah, the sneak preview, I guess you could say, of the 7-inch one, I mean, it looks, just as cool as this one, but it is, like you said, a very sort of like angry Zuko, which I don't know. I would hope they would have like an alternate for the head sculpt for that if they had the resources to do it on that one. Just because it does seem a bit more angry, which I guess that is sort of his character early on. But I don't know. I think a neutral one might have gone a bit better overall. But no, I think Zuko definitely, for me, I think is probably one of the better ones for me in terms of being like on model to what I envision it looking like from like the cartoon.
Yeah, they definitely get the Fire Nation kind of military outfit correct. So if they ever do like a Zhao, they're going to get it right. Azula, they're going to get her right.
Yeah.
Zuko's description reads, Zuko is an incredibly focused teenage firebender who bullies and intimidates everyone around him. He's obsessed with capturing the Avatar. Prince Zuko is the oldest son of Fire Lord Ozai, ruler of the Fire Nation, and the great-grandson of Fire Lord Sozin, who conceived the war. When Prince Zuko was 14, he spoke out against his father and the Fire Nation's conquest. To teach his insubordinate son a lesson, Fire Lord Ozai forced his son to fight him in a traditional firebender duel. The Fire Lord defeated his son in front of his royal army, stripped the prince of his birthright to the throne, and banished him from his homeland, telling him the only way he will allow his return is with the Avatar dead or alive. This is now Prince Zuko's mission. Each day Zuko studies firebending with his uncle, the Fire Lord's brother. Zuko is a powerful firebender for his age and eager to develop his skills. Zuko's greatest weakness are his arrogance and impatience. He believes firebending is the most dominant art and can never be bested by water, earth, or airbending. Zuko's teenage overconfidence makes him believe he's invincible. This one isn't too bad. I think the biggest issue is that when he was 14, he spoke out against his father and the Fire Nation's conquest. That's a really interesting way to frame what he actually said, which was just like showing concern for the way troops were being used, rather than this more frames it as like he was good from the start and disagreed with the Fire Nation's conquest, which took a while to get there. There's also a few weird things, like fought him in a traditional firebender duel. I'm not gonna say that it's called an Agni Kai, okay. And just a few little things like that they still call it Zuko believes firebending is the most dominant art, instead of like what we'd usually say is like form of bending or something like that, but I guess that is roughly the same. And just that it's not too much of a problem, but like it's a little weird that they really emphasize the idea that he's very much like fire is the best. I'd never lose to people from the other nations, which is kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't really ever associate that necessarily with Zuko. Sure, he has to learn to more appreciate the other ones, but I'd never really say he's like, he thinks firebending can never be bested by the others. But this one's fairly okay, I think. But what are your thoughts on this description?
Yeah, no, I would agree that it is pretty, on point for the most part, and getting the like general idea of his character. It feels like some of their phrasing puts it to like sort of the extremes of his sort of like personality, which I don't think even when he was, more in line with sort of the Fire Nation traditional ideals that they currently have of them sort of being, superior to the other sort of, parts of the world. He had all of those sort of like complete traits. Like, I don't know, I would put like more of those things in line with like, say, like Zhao, or someone who's more in depth with the Fire Nation. It seems like Zuko, even back then, wasn't sort of that extreme of a character, which is probably why he was able to turn around things in the end. So I don't know, it's interesting that they're going with this sort of route. So it's like I don't know, it seems like, they're trying to go, I get that they're trying to go like more generic with these, and they're not trying to use any sort of like specific terms that might not be known about to someone who's just picking up this figure for like the first time and doesn't know the show at all, which I don't know. It seems kind of odd to me in this day and age, because that's like the only reason why, all of this stuff is getting made in the first place. So I don't know. It's odd. I don't know. I guess it just seems odd from our perspective, because we know, about these characters, but they're trying to be generic and not use anything really sort of specific, even though it's been out for like so long. So
Mm.
I don't know. It's a odd way to go about it, but it is closer to, Zuko's character, I guess, from so far than the other ones.
Hmm. Last figure is Sokka. So it's book one Sokka. He comes with the boomerang and also the boomerang holder on the back, which is pretty cool the way that actually works. It just sort of slots in over the top, and he shows that off in the video, and it looks kind of cool the way it works. Um, Again, like pretty well done overall. The head sculpt is a little bit weird to me in that the pictures that are very head on, it doesn't look like Sokka, but the ones that are more at like sort of an angle and then in the video, it looks a lot better. Um, Much better than the Diamond Select Sokka head sculpt, which I thought was looked nothing like Sokka. Um, this at least is like, okay, it's maybe more determined than you'd maybe typically want for Sokka, in that there's like two Sokka figures now. Why aren't we doing more of a fun Sokka expression with like a bit more of a grin? And why Sokka always so sort of like um, neutral expression, and like Aang is destined to always have a giant open mouth grin. But it overall looks quite good. The details are there on the different blues of his outfit, and again the articulation looks like it's there. Especially the boots, I actually like the way they did them. But yeah, your thoughts on the Sokka figure?
Yeah, no, I think overall the Sokka one works, pretty well. The whole sort of design that they have for the body in general, I think, aligns with what you would think for a Sokka, and the whole idea with the boomerang and how that works is cool. But yeah, I do agree that the face sculpt definitely seems a bit sort of odd. It feels better in the video that they have up about it, than it does look just sort of in the pictures here per se. And I think we saw some like earlier versions of it, and those seem really odd to me. I don't know, maybe it was just like the angle that they took it at, like you mentioned. But no, I think Sokka is definitely pretty good, and yeah, it is better than a lot of the other ones, which I guess, at least we're getting like, progress with like, just the overall like designs of these, characters. Like I think, initially we were really sort of like off put by the way that they were doing these, but it seems like even if these are separate companies, that they're all at least somewhat keying off of things in order to like improve them over time. So I guess by the time like we get like the next company doing figures or whatever, it'll probably be like perfect spot on towards the show or whatever. But yeah, no, I think it overall looks fine. I think this one it feels like it's the most sort of like, even though it's the same articulation, it feels like this one can actually be, posed in more positions, which I think is cool, because that's sort of like Sokka's like all over the place along with like Aang and stuff.
Mm. Yeah, there's a few little things on the figures, like you can tell maybe that they're missing a paint application here and there. Like on Sokka, the boomerang should have a kind of like white edge to it, whereas like it's all blue. Um, and like his kind of like waistband kind of thing is just kind of like the same color as the plastic. But this is where you kind of realize like this is sort of more of the mass market, cheaper figures that's most of the time aimed more at kids. Um, but because it's McFarlane, there's actually a ton of detail in these as well. But they are going to come out with, as we said, the bigger 7-inch figures, which look to be super super detailed and have the articulation. So it'll be fun to see a closer look at them, especially how they do. I guess their book one Aang will be the other one to go with that Zuko. I think we know it's Aang, I just don't think we know which one it is, but I'm guessing it'll be book one Aang. Like, will they attempt to go for the unusual outfit there, or that'll be a really telling one. But yeah, that's the lineup here. And again, interestingly, it is Walmart exclusive in America, and as far as I'm aware, they sold out pretty much straight away. Yeah, looking at like the Aang here is out of stock. Appa, I'm guessing, is out of stock. Yep, I think everything's out of stock. So this is popular. People wanted these, and especially because I suppose you buy the whole wave. It's surprisingly like affordable, because it's like 40 for just the 4 basic figures. The Appa's like 20. That was only 20 actually. I thought it was 25. And the Aang with Glider's 15. So like you're getting this whole wave of like the a complete like book one scene almost for just like under 100 basically, which is much better value than like that would get you like 3 or 4 Diamond Select figures. So it looks a lot better, and you have a giant Oppa with this lineup as well. So I think just the price point here and the fact that they look like pretty close to like spot on for a very cheap price makes this like very, very appealing. In that Toph, I think they're going to do really well with this. Azula, I guess we'll get to Iroh pretty quickly with this line, hopefully, because we haven't seen an Iroh yet. We haven't seen a Suki yet, but we're holding out hope that we get to those ones eventually. But yeah, this is good so far. Definitely, people seem pretty pleased with it from what I've seen in terms of a general reaction. The fact that it is going to be, I suppose, slightly more available, I guess, than the Diamond Select ones overall, is also going to help. But just I suppose overall, your thoughts on this line?
Yeah, no, overall, I think this is done pretty well. I think, a lot of people were sort of like holding out for this line in terms of being like sort of the best of what we're sort of have been, getting so far from all the companies that have been sort of like jumping on this bandwagon of making Avatar figures. So I think, for the most part, that's actually probably pretty much on point. I think, a lot of the other ones have, sort of been, in the game a little bit longer, so they have sort of like improved over time compared to sort of their initial sort of outings. But I think as far as like, the first time of them sort of getting into this with these figures, these are probably like, as we can see so far, ones that are people really wanted and were looking forward to, and I think is going to do pretty well. So it should be interesting to see, how available these are, sort of going forward. Since right now, as you said, it's already sold out on Walmart. Will you be able to get these in other places? How does that whole thing go? It feels like all these companies are, I don't know, they're popular enough that, these and the fans are enough in here that it seems like it's always really hard to sort of get these, for people who aren't sort of like in the know and already know about it. So I just, I always wonder about sort of just general availability of these going down the line. But I guess that's something that we'll have to sort of like wait and see on.
Yeah, I feel kind of bad for like American fans having to rely on Walmart, because I was just like, oh, there they are on Amazon.co.uk. I'll just pre-order this whole first wave. Done.
Yeah.
So it was like easy for me, but then like I also have the huge struggle of like, where on earth am I going to get the best action figures from? And that like it's a new company, like basically nowhere sells it, and I'm still waiting to see if I actually get that figure. So yeah, availability is always going to be a problem. Hopefully they work that out, and I think the big thing is like I think a lot of people are hoping the 7-inch wave lineup isn't exclusive and it's just a normal figure you can get wherever, because I think that's what people are really holding out for in terms of a proper competition to Diamond Select. Even though I think most people are already preferring this 5-inch line to the Diamond Select figures, people are hoping that that's a real like blowout, that for basically I suppose the same price point as Diamond Select, they're really gonna deliver. So it looks like the Zuko comes with more accessories than the 5-inch line, but it doesn't look like there's too much in the box. So it'll all come down to just how the articulation is, how it looks, and so on. So that's going to be interesting, because other than that, I think we're just kind of holding out hope that eventually one of the high-end sort of Japanese companies picks up the Avatar license and starts to like release like Figma Avatar or SH Figuarts Avatar. That'd be like absolutely 100% ideal, though much more expensive. But some collectors, of course, just want the perfect figure for this character, and you probably will have to wait on a company like that to get it. So yeah, that's it for action figure news for now. I don't think they said when they were going to announce the 7-inch wave. I'm surprised that they didn't do it at the same time, but I guess it's coming eventually. And then still no sign of the statue, the 10-inch Aang that we saw the listing for last time. So there's a few more Avatar things from McFarlane to be announced, but this definitely felt like sort of big action figure news. It wasn't just like a few people talked about it. Like this really went around as like, it felt like the launch of a toy line type thing. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, last piece of news. Suki Alone preview pages are finally here. And like I said earlier on, I was able to request and get a review copy of this book. So I do have a non-spoiler review up on my channel right now. And of course, I and will on the podcast as well be doing a spoiler review on the release date of the book on the 27th of July 2021. So that's the release date. But yeah, we'll get into talking about these preview pages here. So we have I think it's like 8 pages. I think it is, yeah, 8 pages. So we start off with the first 3 pages of the book. I can confirm these are the very first 3 pages of the book. So straight away, Azula is here, and she, of course, has Suki in front of her. But interestingly, we're sort of, I suppose, still in, I guess, the Earth Kingdom here. That this is just sort of a Earth Kingdom camp that they keep them in before they send them off to the Fire Nation, or else it's like place on the mainland Fire Nation before they send them off to the Boiling Rock. It's not particularly clear, but she's about to go onto a warship to go off to the Boiling Rock. And she says, so any last words before I send you to the Boiling Rock? And we get a pretty interesting dialogue scene between Azula and Suki. Giving me the silent treatment, that's no fun. Don't you have a message you want to give to someone? Like that boy with the boomerang, what's his name? Saki? Suka? Sokka. Whatever, I know. I should just tell him that you're desperate for him to come and rescue you. I'm sure he would if he could. Then it could capture you both and take turns tormenting you. Doesn't that sound fun? And Suki says, I don't need anyone to rescue me. Azula says, you'll be completely alone at the Boiling Rock. None of your other Kyoshi warriors will be there, so no sisterly bonding in captivity. I want you to experience just how hard Fire Nation prison life can be, fighting your fellow prisoners for miserable scraps just to stay alive. Just think, only a short time ago you were the leader of the Kyoshi warriors, respected and feared, but now your sisterhood is in ruins thanks to your failures. Now you get to watch from a prison cell while the Fire Nation rolls over the Earth Kingdom. And we'll get to the next page in a minute. But yeah, as kind of predicted, we were going to get some sort of a Azula Suki scene of, you know, Azula sending her off. They also used this to, I suppose, directly set up the Azula Sokka scene from the invasion in a kind of interesting way, in terms of it's like Azula is like, I'm going to tell Sokka this if I see him, and that's exactly what she ends up doing. Even though Suki, as we see here, didn't say that. But still, it's very Azula. It is, I think, it's, yeah, Faith Aaron Hicks's first time writing Azula, so pretty good so far. But what are your thoughts on these opening 2 pages here?
Yeah, I think this is a great way to start it off. I think this is, you know, something that we've all thought, like, how did this, you know, initial send-off go, you know, with Suki? And I think this is, you know, it feels to me pretty much on point with how this sort of interaction would be here. And, you know, all the dimensions of what happens later on, I think this is perfectly in line with it. And, you know, I wouldn't, you know, like, and you've already seen this, so you know, but, you know, you wouldn't expect there to be a lot of Azula, but the fact that they do have her in this, you know, aligns perfectly well with what we would think. So, no, it works well for me.
Yeah, and this is the only Azula scene in the book. Like, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that she doesn't appear again, but like, it's just here to be the send-off. A few interesting things here, of course. Just Azula misremembering Sokka's name, it says Saki and Suka, which I guess are the 2 versions of the Sokka Suki ship, basically, of like Suki first, Sokka second, and then Sokka first, Suki second, if you spelled it S-O-K-I as like Saki. That's kind of interesting. And then we get into sort of the continuity thing here of like, how does Azula even know Sokka and Suki are like close? That specifically of like, she sort of knows that, okay, she has some connection to Team Avatar because she saw when she captured Suki that Suki knew Appa and like says Aang's name. but where does she get the Suki Sokka connection from? That's sort of the question in all of this, in terms of when exactly is this scene set, because I had a lot of time to kind of think about this, and when you really analyze it, like, the only way Azula could possibly know is Sokka says to Ty Lee when she's dressed up as a Kyoshi warrior that she's like involved with Suki. So if this is set after the end of book 2, from Ty Lee, Azula might know that Suki has a connection to Sokka, which I'm guessing is basically when this is set, in somewhere in the middle of book 3. Suki is moved from this prison camp here to the Boiling Rock. So I'm guessing it's relatively early book 1, and so at least that roughly fits where it is. Otherwise, there's that kind of lack of like, how would she know? Because Suki is in very few scenes prior to returning in book 3, and none of them are with Azula until, 216, of course. So I know it's a really relatively minor point in this, but what are your thoughts on that? How does Azula know the Sokka Suki connection?
Yeah, that is an interesting one. I don't know. Fire Nation intelligence reports, maybe they sort of have keyed in on their relationship somehow. But yeah, other than Ty Lee, I guess that is an interesting one. But I don't know. I wonder if that's just also just sort of like, it's like sort of like a known thing, just in general terms from the fans. It's something so that it sort of like works, even though if it doesn't really work through the true continuity lines. But for what it's worth, I think it kind of makes sense that if she did know that she would use that to her advantage however she could.
Page 3 is Azula says, I'm doing all this especially for you because you're my favorite prisoner and you deserve the best the Fire Nation can offer its enemies. And again, Suki does not say anything to Azula, so she just walks off. Well, since you're no fun at all, I'll have to make my own when I track down the Avatar and his little group. Have fun cooling your heels in prison while I destroy your friends. And we end with this moment of Suki walking off in chains onto the airship. So this is again another little bit of continuity in that, like, Azula notes that she's still trying to hunt down the Avatar, so she believes Aang is still alive at this point, which this is why there's a second layer of sort of continuity stuff here in terms of like, wait, how does this work? Because it would sort of make sense if it's like pre-220, but then how does she know Sokka Suki? If it's afterwards, how does she know Aang's alive? So I guess it has to be after that scene in is it 301 or 302 when Azula more or less figures out from what Zuko says that Aang probably is still alive in some way. It has to be there. So it's probably more into book 3 than we think it is, and that's probably the way to explain it. But for being a one-shot where they're trying to not do anything important, they do tend to push the edges of continuity a little bit when they don't really, I think, need to. Just a little bit more sort of detail or thought could kind of help them avoid seeming issues like this where they've almost written themselves into a corner here. But it's Azula being Azula. We get the whole mention of my favorite prisoner, so here's where she mentions it again, and it's classic Azula wanting to just leave Suki with the idea of, you can't do anything while I'm going to do all this stuff to your friends, and make her feel helpless. So very Azula, but the continuity thing is a bit weird to me. But your thoughts on this page?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely is sort of in character with Azula and sort of her idea of being able to at least attempt to manipulate Suki in this regard. Well, I guess we'll see, how good or bad it does, as we know later on. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I wonder, how, I guess they're trying to play it so safe that sort of let some things slip by in terms of, sort of getting things to perfectly flow in terms of the whole overall storyline here. But, I think it does, for the most part, work for what they're going for.
Next, this is a page skip of about, I think we skip over about 14, 15 pages here, if I remember correctly, to get to this next scene. So it's not that we cut straight to Suki in prison for a while, meeting this other prisoner here. No, we do actually get a scene of Suki actually arriving at the Boiling Rock. We do introduce one of the other unique elements of the book, which I don't know why they didn't mention this in any of the marketing, but we do get Suki flashback scenes throughout this book. I won't go into detail on what we actually get during these in-between pages, but we start to get them in during this sort of in-between, and that's a really important part of the book. Is we see Suki in the prison, of course, doing her thing here, but what we learn about her in the past is also kind of equally as important. And I think that got a lot of people excited when I mentioned that in my non-spoiler review, so it's just a whole extra thing of like, yeah, you probably should have mentioned that in the marketing. That's a big selling point in the book, like some Suki backstory content. But anyway, we jump in here after a little bit, of course, big page skip. So one of the other prisoners is like, seriously, what animal made these? No animal with taste buds, that's for sure. Suki introduces herself. Good for you, but unless you've got something edible to offer, I don't want to know you. And Suki says, actually, I might. What you got? Introductions first. I am Suki, and you are? My name's Biu, or Bayu, I'm not sure about exactly how you pronounce that. What landed you in the Fire Nation's least favorite people resort? I'm the leader of the Kyoshi Warriors. The Kyoshi Warriors? Is that some kind of Avatar Kyoshi tribute group? And Suki explains, sort of. We're an elite group of women warriors who have devoted our lives to Avatar Kyoshi. We left our home to join the cause against the Fire Nation, and that led us to fight Princess Azula. She won, unfortunately. So this is, Suki's approach in the prison is to try and get some of the other prisoners on her side. She's going to be really nice to them. And as Azula actually mentioned in her dialogue in that opening scene there, fighting with the other prisoners for scraps, basically food, is a big thing in the Boiling Rock. So Bayu only wants to talk to her if she can offer her food in some way. And Suki says that she actually kind of can, and so this is what starts the conversation. And then it is funny seeing an outsider's view of the Kyoshi Warriors, in that everyone knows Avatar Kyoshi, but wait, the Kyoshi Warriors, you made a fan group for Kyoshi? That's their reaction. That's kind of cool that is the case. So just Suki being her kind of usual friendly self here. But what are your thoughts about her first interaction with one of the other prisoners here?
No, I like her stance for this sort of interaction to try to get, someone on her side, the whole mention of not having any sort of like sisterly bonding. And this is, Suki being herself, basically trying to create that. And, with her obvious, leadership abilities and seeing what can be used in this sort of situation here, she's able to use that initially to her advantage here. But yeah, I think it is funny to see the outside perspective of, the Kyoshi Warriors, because, it is interesting, Kyoshi, so many years later, is so popular, is so, famous in her own right, but, them being, localized to that island, probably isn't that, famous yet. As we know, of course, later on, they do become more famous and, more known and such forth. But, at this point in time in the world, they're just, not that well known, despite, how pivotal they will become.
The scene continues. Biu says, that's much more impressive than what landed me in here. I stole things, mostly. Seems strange that simply being a thief would put you in a prison for the Fire Nation's most wanted. It was more of who I stole from and what it was that landed me in the Boiling Rock. And she basically explains her backstory here. The last thing I stole before ending up in here was the heart of this Fire Nation kid, who happened to be the son of a prominent general. The kid's mom didn't take it well that her precious baby had fallen for a known Earth Kingdom thief, so I got dumped here. I learned the hard way to never underestimate the wrath of a Fire Nation mother. As we see this Fire Nation kid with the rose kind of like kneeling in front of her. The next panel is like him in tears next to his mother, who's obviously high up in the military, and her being carted away by Fire Nation guards. So kind of pretty fun thing just to get a bit of the backstory that like, yeah, it's the Boiling Rock where they house the Fire Nation's most wanted, but a lot of the people are there for just rather sort of petty reasons like this, of just the high ups in the Fire Nation like abusing their power to just get people they dislike for petty reasons in there. So this puts a lot of stuff into perspective with the likes of, like, I think we've already discussed when we discussed the Boiling Rock, like what put Chit Sang in prison. He ends up being a rather nice guy ultimately. So what did he do that angered the Fire Nation so much? This makes it clear that it probably was something rather low key, like this. So Suki is probably one of the few people who are in there for probably like valid sort of reasons of like being on the opposite side in the war type thing. But what are your thoughts on this page and BU's backstory?
Yeah, I don't know, I like that they're doing this, and you mentioned that there's, more of this from Suki's side of things, but, the fact that they give, a little bit to sort of, get the idea of her character, sort of why she's there. I think, it goes a long way, even if it is, a character that won't have, a bigger role overall in sort of like, the whole Avatar universe or whatever. But, the fact that there is, something here, I think it does go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Next scene, Kyoshi says, "I'm sorry you lost your boyfriend. He wasn't my boyfriend. He was just some guy. Anyway, I think we've been introduced enough. Where's the grub you promised me?" So Suki says, "Here," and takes out some plants, which look like kind of peas or something like that. I think they're named in the book. I'd have to go back and actually get the name of them in a second. But she says, "These plants might not look like much, but they're rich in nutrients and tasty as well. They'll help sustain you." And Biu says, "I hope so. It's not just that the food tastes terrible. It's not enough to keep a healthy body going either. It's how the Fire Nation keeps the prisoners subdued. How can you think about causing trouble when you're half starved all the time?" And Suki turns around and sees these two guys that look basically like zombies, because like they have like no energy whatsoever with the quality of the food that they're being given. And Suki's like, "I have an idea. Come with me." And of course, can I finish my food first? So Suki has an idea based on food. And again, like I said before, Azula mentioned that this is a dynamic in the Boiling Rock, the fight for better food and stuff like that. And her finding these plants is kind of significant. She can offer people something that will make them feel better, as well as more food, different food. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic here. Would I say it's the absolute focus of this side of the story? Not really overall, but they use this as one of the dynamics, of course, throughout the book. But what are your thoughts on Suki revealing this plant that she has and what she can offer the other prisoners?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, it's one way to sort of change the circumstances that they're currently in, and apparently it seems to be one of the main things that's used as control in this prison. So the fact that she's able to figure out some way to counteract it, seems like a good idea, at least initially to me.
So we cut to the next page and we see sort of these are just sort of random plants that seem to just grow here and there around the prison. Everyone else seems to have sort of ignored them, but Suki focuses in on these. It's like, oh, I know these. So we see her kind of taking some more. They're hiding it from the guards. They're looking around for a good place to sort of, where can we kind of hide these out where no one will see them? So we get the idea that this spot is hidden from the guards so we can see what we have. So they just note that they found a lot. Thanks for your help. And let's divide them up and have a meal. And Suki says, "No, we have to save half for seeds." And Biu's like, "You want to grow a garden in the middle of a prison?" And Suki's like, "So if we plant some of these seeds, more will grow and we'll have a stash of food for later. Maybe we can even grow enough to share with the other prisoners." And Biu's like, "The other prisoners? Who cares about them?" And Suki does say, "I care about them. You said it yourself. The poor food makes it impossible for them to fight back against the Fire Nation. If we can't get enough, if we can't get everyone better food, there's a chance for pushback against the guards, maybe even a chance for us to escape. And B is just like, okay, you're the boss. So this is just the idea of like, this is the start of her community. Here's the first girl that she has met and sort of got on her side, and she has a plan to use the plants that she has to grow more, to have this overall stash of food that will not only bring people onto her side, but hopefully strengthen everyone up to maybe initiate an escape attempt. So pretty reasonable kind of plan here. Nothing super specific, but there's still a community to grow before we get to that point. But it's Suki being the leader here, and someone else beginning to sort of consider her that way. You're the boss. So I do like that. But what are your thoughts on these last couple of pages?
Yeah, no, I think the start of this sort of dynamic that the first two have here, with Suki being in sort of the leadership role here and at least having some sort of plan for pushback, seems like something that, she would do in terms of her character traits and her character personality. So, no, I like the initial start to this, and it's interesting just to see how they're, winding this all together in this, period of time that we really didn't know too much about. So, I think, the start of this is interesting. So I think it's doing its job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, I've read the book. I really like this comic overall. I think it's far and away the best of the 3 one-shots. Like it's not just like a step in the right direction on from the top comic. It's like feels like 2 or 3 steps forward. Like it's much better, much more in line, I think, with what we want. I think people are going to be pretty impressed overall with the Suki backstory we get, and where they go with Suki as a character. Like they said, kind of going in, we're going to sort of see Suki at her kind of low point, and we definitely do get to that point in the book, and I think they do that quite well. And there's just a lot of cool stuff that I think it really helps that we have even more context now post the Kyoshi novels for just stuff that relates to, Kyoshi Island, Yokoya, and that now Kyoshi is really important there, and you just learn more about the place, Suki's past and stuff like that. It's a really good book. It feels like there's a lot of takeaways from this one, whereas there's basically none from the Katara book, and a lava bender is in the Toph book was about really it. This one is this is kind of essential reading for Suki. Like this really, you feel like if they had the right moment for Suki and they'd shown this backstory, it would have been probably a notable episode of the show. So I think it's worthy of the Alone title, Suki Alone. So that definitely good stuff. Faith Erin Hicks definitely knows how to write Suki, as we saw from before. So I'm excited to see more people read this comic, because so it's always weird kind of just being on my own over here, just like I want to talk about this but I can't for another month basically. But it's really good. I just hope there's not a massive gap between this and the next one, because it feels like they're getting into a little bit of a role on how to do things in the right way. So about a month until this book comes out, we will be doing a review, big, full, detailed, page-by-page analysis of this book. I'll have a spoiler review up on my YouTube channel as well on the day of release. Who knows, if the Google Books preview pages with extra pages comes out, we might do something with that, but I'm not sure when exactly that's going to go live or anything like that. So yeah, that is all of the news that we have. In terms of stuff coming up, of course, Braving the Elements podcast is going to continue. We're always on the lookout for stuff relating to new books and so on. But Comic-Con is happening next month, and there's not been a lot of hype or build up to it, at least just yet, like there usually is when it's in person. So the schedule isn't really out yet. We don't know if there's going to be anything Avatar, but we don't know there's not going to be anything Avatar either. This feels like an event to do some sort of reveal, but is it too early? Is it not too early? It's kind of unclear. Obviously, this, like I said, is still basically a month until this event actually happens. And I guess in the coming weeks we'll be finding out if we are going to get an Avatar panel of sorts. I think this will be the place to do some sort of a big first announcement. I think it would be cool to have some sort of a stream everyone can check out as they reveal the first phase of Avatar Studios or whatever. Because if they don't do it now, it's sort of like, when are they going to do it? Are they going to wait until the end of the year? Because, at some point they have to say the first pieces of information about this. And are we really going to be waiting like a year after the initial announcement, or what? So I suppose the final thing here on the podcast is just what are your expectations for Comic-Con? Do you think they'll do anything for Avatar, or will it just be similar to what we've had before, of like a publishing panel that doesn't really have anything, or will they go for the big Avatar Studios panel and the first reveals? What do you think they'll do?
I don't know. They've been so like, close to the vest with all the information about Avatar Studios that it doesn't feel like they're really gearing up for it. But maybe they're really just sort of holding back on it and just sort of waiting to let it all go, or I don't know. I mean, Comic-Con is coming up, and then there also are other Comic-Cons near the end of the year as well, which might give them a little bit more time to sort of, think of the big ones and the big announcements. I don't know. I mean, I guess this is Avatar Studios, and now that we know that they're more working along the animation side, that normally coincides with SDCC rather than New York Comic Con or anything like that. So I don't know. I almost would think that they would put more stuff, if they're ready for it, at the one that's coming up sooner rather than later. So I don't know. I'm still not really sure on that front.
Mm-hmm. But either way, even if there's not news at Comic-Con, the Suki book is out at basically the same time, just after Comic-Con. So, well, hopefully we get something. It has to happen eventually, because like the Netflix live action show is just like in its sort of casting, about to begin production phase. So like the information like is kind of like slowly and surely coming out for that, but none of it's like particularly interesting right now, because it's just like, this guy might be directing an episode, and it's like, who's this guy? That sort of stuff. Whereas we're more looking for like new story ideas, which are going to be the new project, and like characters, concept art sort of stuff. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. We'll see if anything else big news-wise happens, and we'll do a podcast whenever. So, if nothing particularly big happens, I guess the next podcast probably will be around this time next month, if not, obviously, a week or two earlier. But that's been Avatar Online Podcast, episode 230. It's been myself and Greg. Thanks for listening, and bye.
Bye.